You're listening to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, your escape to reality.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. Today is Thursday, March 26th, 2026, and this is your host, Stephen Novella. Joining me this week are Bob Novella. Hey, everybody. Kara Santamaria.
Howdy.
Shay Novella.
Hey, guys.
And Evan Bernstein.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. I'm enjoying the spring weather today. It's perfect, like
spring.
60-something. This is when I get to open the windows and like get some fresh air into the house, you know?
I love
After being closed in all winter.
Especially after the winter we had, which was pretty brutal here in the Northeast.
I'm seeing some leaves grow already.
Wow, it must be so strange to have seasons. You're seeing leaves grow, and I'm like the trees and shrubs and stuff have been blooming for weeks in LA.
Well, aren't you?
LA has seasons. It has fire season. It has
season.
It has
award season.
Atmospheric river season.
And if things go how they seem, you may have an oil spill season.
Yeah, that's true. But no, at least it's not 95 out this week. It's only 85, so it's been more.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, manageable. Woof.
Woof. Did you just absorb my exclamations that I've been saying weirdly now?
Did you invent woof, Bob?
I didn't, but I mean, it just comes out. When something dramatic happens, I just comes out. And now I've infected you, apparently, so that's cool.
Speaking of things just coming out, I'm looking at a picture of what's being described as, well, I'll read you what one website is saying, a tentacle object that is with its limbs emerging from what appears to be a space egg floating on the International Space Station. What is this?
Yeah. You mean the potato?
Stop the podcast right now and Google ISS space potato.
Don't tell people to stop the podcast. Do it while we're still playing.
If you can multitask, then have at it.
Or look at the picture that's associated with this podcast, because that's what I'm using as this podcast picture.
Ooh.
That's pretty awesome.
So
it looks very Cthulhu-esque here. I'm digging it. And it's because it's not a conventional potato. It's like a weird purple potato.
Well, yeah,
which are delicious,
potato,
by the way.
Yeah,
like little
common.
fingerling. Yeah,
you just don't. I don't know. You don't see them that often.
It's a contextless photo. I think this is why it looks so bizarre, because it's in space. It's floating.
It's floating.
So right there, that's
the angle,
weird.
They took the picture at an angle as such as like it does look like something's possibly emerging from it. So you think, and it's shaped like an egg. So what do you think? You think, okay, something is hatching, right? That's your first thought.
And don't forget, it looks evil. There's a clear evil cast to this. It doesn't look friendly.
Gnarly.
But it's just sprouting. It's just a potato that's sprouting.
Yes,
that's all it is. And the sprouts are purple because it's a purple potato.
It's probably yummy.
No, aren't they kind of gross by the time they do that? Or am I wrong?
No, you just cut them out.
You cut those out. Yeah, you just.
But sometimes they're like deep in there.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I guess you just cut out the eyes. It's cut out the eyes. Jesus, that sounds evil.
Just cut out its eyes.
Yeah, it's also got like a weird sheen on it. It's got Velcro attached to it. It definitely, without context, you would never know that's a potato.
I know. I instantly thought it was a potato, but I've seen potatoes sprouting like that.
You've seen potatoes floating in the air.
We all have.
It looks like a very sick kiwi.
It kind of does.
Someone on Twitter is referring it to as Spudnik 1. Spudnik.
Of course.
I love
it. And also, have you seen the photo where they zoomed in on the little growth? It looks like I don't know, what does it remind me of? A gremlin? Is it gremlin-esque? It almost has like a little face and little arms and legs. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's my paranoia.
Oh my god!
Yeah, you can see it, right?
No, it looks like Ryland Grace from in Xenonite on Hail Mary.
No, it looks like Quato from.
I know none of these references.
Get your ass to Maz.
Those are the eyes, right? That's what we're looking at. These are potato eyes. Is that
it's the sprout growing out of the eye.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a reason, I'm sure, why these things occur.
This is how potatoes reproduce.
Yeah, they're plants. They're growing.
What you do, like if you want to propagate a potato, you cut out each eye and plant it.
Oh, you cut the eye and plant it?
No, you cut out a piece of the potato containing an eye.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't you watch The Martian?
see.
That's what he was doing.
Yeah, but I thought he took
potatoes.
the smaller, the
No,
the
so it's
smaller
one eye
potatoes and
per
used those.
piece because each eye will root and grow a new plant.
You can also just plant the whole potato.
You could.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You could.
But either way, yeah, that's just a root system.
Yeah.
Apparently they're called peeps.
Aw. Peeps.
Peeps?
Yes, according to the
stale.
AI overview on Google, sometimes they are called
Okay.
peeps. And they signify the end of the potato's dormancy and the start of a new plant growing.
Often mistaken as an alien from space.
And it also says, as to what you mentioned, they are natural and safe to eat if removed, though they indicate the potato is getting old.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah,
That's
at
when
a
you know
certain
it's time
point,
to
it gets
eat your
gross.
potatoes.
Exactly.
If you have them sitting in your pantry, it's like, oh, okay.
Well, there's that old expression, long in the tooth, right? It's getting old, so this is long in the eye.
Yeah.
Nice.
You know what long in the tooth refers to?
Horses, right?
Horses,
about a horse.
Receding gum
Yeah.
lines.
Well, their teeth, from what I understand, because I could look it up, they continue to grow. And so you could tell the age of a horse by how long its teeth is.
I see.
So
I
then
see. That
for-
other animals have similar phenomena. I think rabbits also, their teeth will
They've got big
continually grow.
So for a person, could you say long in the ear? Because ears and noses just continue growing as you get older?
Oh, and what I'm reading that you're kind of both correct, Evan and Steve. The teeth themselves don't grow, but they continue to erupt because as the horse chews, the tooth emerges from the gum line. So there's a reserve of tooth that's always there, and it looks like it's growing because it's erupting over time.
So it is getting the visible part is
Yeah,
getting
the visible part is physically getting longer, yeah. But the tooth
Well, that makes
itself
sense.
is
I
not
mean, the enamel
growing.
can't grow. It's got to be from the base, from the root.
That's interesting.
From the root.
Long in the
The
tooth.
root of the tooth, the root of the potato plant. Hey, it all comes together.
Root of the problem.
All right. We're going to do another Back to Basics. That was a very popular segment, Kara, that you did a couple
yeah.
weeks ago.
Oh, great.
Done, Kara.
How do you know it was popular? Emails?
Based upon email
you just
response.
saying that?
It's also one of those things where, like, after talking about the fundamental attribution error, it is, I mean, obviously I am doing this. It's my own bias, but it is coming up in therapy sessions, in casual conversations with people. I'm noticing it everywhere. It's just been a hot topic of conversation in my life ever since I kind of redrew my attention to it.
Do you know what that's called?
Funny how that's.
I would
that
call it the
happens.
pi effect. You guys remember that movie Pi?
Something.
It is the frequency illusion, but
There you
that's
go.
a more specific name. That's the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. When something is drawn to your attention, then you start to see it everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And that is, you guys remember Aronofsky's film Pi? That is
Sure.
basically the whole crux of it, is that he was just seeing this number every single place he looked. And he started to think it had deeper meaning than it actually had.
Right. Like Ralph Cramden.
Do you
Who
know,
gets that reference?
I do not.
well, I know who Ralph Cramden was.
There was an episode where he was noticing the number 4 everywhere. So whatever he bet on it on the lottery, and of course he came in 4th.
What are the odds?
God.
All right.
Classic.
So I'm going to do confirmation
Ralph.
bias.
Yeah.
Because this is, I
Big
think, the
one.
most basic of basics in terms of skeptical thinking. It is the mother of all cognitive biases.
Wait, I thought non sequitur was.
That's logical fallacy. That's your core logical fallacy. This is a core cognitive bias.
Gotcha.
So how would you guys give what would be a quickie definition for confirmation bias?
Remember the hits and not the misses?
Yeah,
Or
that's
remember
the
misses and not
classic
hits?
phrase.
Yeah.
Remember the hits, forget the misses, which is true as far as it goes, but doesn't come close to really capturing the
whole
breadth
thing.
of what it is. So
Not even close.
not even close.
Well,
At least
But it
60%
skims
of
the
way there.
surface.
But
It
it's
skims the
pithy,
surface.
Steve.
I know, it's pithy. Yeah. Confirmation bias it's more comprehensive than that. It's more all-pervasive. So it basically means that we tend to process information in such a way that it confirms what we already believe or what we want to believe. Right? So even if you think
That is.
that's something,
You know.
yeah, I have to agree that this is the case, but I really want it to be this other way, you will look for information to confirm what you want to believe. It's all confirmation bias. So it goes beyond just remembering the hits and forgetting the misses. So it has to
Right.
do with what you notice, right?
Yeah, you have to attend to it first.
How you interpret what you notice, the energy you spend debunking things that do not fit what you want to believe, right? And your memory. So it's like every step of the way in terms of how you are processing information. So, for example, if there's something on the news that is in line with your political ideology, you'll notice it, accept it, and remember it. And then your memory will also alter over time to make it like even more support what you believe, right? It becomes apocryphal almost. Like
there's like,
it.
and then there's like all this
Insidious, man.
post hoc reasoning where you like justify after the fact as well.
Yeah, and that is, I would file all that under motivated reasoning, which goes hand in hand with confirmation bias.
Confirmation. It's funny. It's one of those things where when you dig below the surface of a lot of cognitive biases, there's confirmation bias at the core.
It's lurking there. Like that's why I said like the mother of all cognitive biases. But same thing with motivated reasoning. If you want to make a case for something, you can do it. And ironically, the smarter you are, the better you are at that. And also the more practiced you are in rhetoric, like skeptics. Right? You're armed with knowledge of things like logical fallacies. You could leverage all of that to get to the point you want to get to. So that's, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with confirmation bias. So how that works, I think a good way to think about confirmation bias, that it's working in the background. This is largely subconscious. It's working in the background to curate your entire perception and memory of reality in order to confirm or reinforce narratives about how the world is and how the world works that you believe or want to believe.
So this is the reason why our brains do.
Well, the reason why is because you need heuristics to survive.
Well,
like
that's a deeper question.
Yeah.
And that gets to, there's a lot of motivation there. Like we all want to think about ourselves as being good people. We all want to be correct. We all have, we want to reinforce our community, our identity. There's all kinds of motivations. But that's kind of irrelevant to the question of this process. Whatever your motivation for wanting to believe something, confirmation bias is the mechanism by which you create the illusion that it's real.
Well, and that's the point I was trying to make, is that as human beings, we have to have a consistent narrative for our own sense of mental health.
Yeah.
Like we have to feel like things in this world are predictable and consistent and we can make sense of them and tell a story. Because if we didn't, we would be experiencing constant disruptions to our sense of self, to our sense of continuity. That's what I meant when I was saying like that's why we do it.
Oh, yeah.
It's foundational to the idea of identity.
Absolutely. All that is true. And then we do explain the world and understand the world and our place in it with these narratives. And that's why if you want to change somebody's mind, you can't just, hey, here's a fact, We don't just know disconnected facts. We plug them into a narrative. That's sort of another way to look at confirmation bias. Like once you have the narrative structure, you're plugging facts into that narrative structure. So you select facts. That's also the other thing, is there's a selection bias going on. You select facts, you force them to fit within your narrative, and you find reason to reject facts or reinterpret them if they don't fit. Right? I mean, I was just, arguing with an anti-vaxxer in the comments, of my blog. He said something that was absolutely incorrect. I cited 2 published studies showing him that he's incorrect, and he found a reason to dismiss each study. Oh, that came from this university, and they take pharma money. Like, who doesn't? I mean, that's just like waved away the evidence because he couldn't plug it into his pre-existing narrative. It's, blatant confirmation bias.
Take a lot of effort to incorporate that into his narratives.
Yeah.
Well, his narrative is wrong. There is no way to incorporate it into it. You'd have to change his narrative.
Yeah, and sometimes it's more obvious than other times when we're using just like that. That's a perfect example, but we do it all the time.
Everyone does it all the time.
Yeah.
All you could really do is be on the alert for it and to minimize it and try to compensate for it. But it's really powerful because it does, again, the power of confirmation bias is that it creates the illusion of evidence that you are correct. Like a powerful illusion. And so you come away thinking, this is rock solid. I know this is true because I've experienced it. I've lived it. I've seen it. It's out there, whatever. But it's like, yeah, but that could be all confirmation bias. It may have nothing to do with reality, but we can carve our perception, our narrative out of reality using confirmation bias.
Oh, sure. Easily.
It's really powerful. I think
human.
it took me a long time to like really appreciate how powerful this could be. It's not just about remembering, remembering hits and forgetting the misses. It really is. It's this narrative preserving, all encompassing perception, reasoning, memory process that really does create this powerful illusion. And you have to be aware of it. You may really think something is true, and you have to acknowledge, unless you have completely objective, verifiable evidence that other people can look at, you know what I mean? If it's just based upon, in any way, if there's any opportunity for confirmation bias, it could be complete nonsense that you have constructed entirely out of confirmation bias.
Well, and even verifiable evidence, which I think this is such an important point that you're getting to here, is that there are things that are verifiable. Mm-hmm. There are facts in the world that we can say beyond a shadow of the doubt are true, but those exist discreetly. Those exist decontextualized. It's our role to contextualize them into a narrative, and that is where there sort of is no such thing as no confirmation bias.
Well, yes, that's correct.
When you glue all those things together to have a narrative, it can no longer be scrutinized fully in whole as purely evidence-based, for example.
So I think a good point to emphasize there is that through confirmation bias, you can construct a narrative that's wrong out of facts that are true.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be out of misinformation. Then you could say, but each one of these individual facts is true.
How insidious is that crap?
It is very insidious, which is like, I would say that's a necessary but insufficient criteria for your narrative being valid or better than other narratives. But you have to then say, but did I cherry pick these facts, or were they curated for me? Now here's the other thing. We now live in a world where other people are doing your confirmation bias for you.
Social media,
thank
baby.
goodness.
Yeah, that's what social media largely is. And mainstream media increasingly is becoming this, where if you're inside an information ecosystem that is all confirmation bias. It's like we all have had this experience, especially with the political polarization in this country over the last 10 years, of talking to somebody who's otherwise a reasonable person. You may be close with them, and they're like, what universe are you living in? Like, it really feels like they're living in a different universe because
now you hate them.
They are. Because they are. They're living in a different information universe. That's confirmation bias too. It's sort of like pre-confirmation bias before the information even gets to you.
Yeah. And I would argue that even if all of your facts are correct, and you could have two different people with the same sets of facts coming up with two different narratives, one might be true, one might not be true, there are also situations in which those two different people have two equally valid narratives, even though they're different, because they're made up of the same facts, and their interpretations are up for interpretation.
Yeah. So here's, again, on the comments to my blog, there's one particular poster who is clearly an informed and intelligent person, but we disagree on a lot of things. And when we disagree, it's interesting because we agree on the facts, not 100% of the time, but we mostly agree on the facts, and we disagree on how they're weighted, like what the relative contribution of them are. It's like, yes, I'm agreeing with you that happened, and he's agreeing with me that this other thing happened, but he thinks he has the 90%er, and I think I have the 90%er. And that's where it's like, well, how do you prove that? That's really judgment and logic, and it becomes down to confirmation bias.
Right.
He's constructing a different narrative out of the same data that I am because of the judgment element that's involved.
And that's why we have to be so careful to watch the hubris and the arrogance, especially in the skeptical community, because so often I encounter individuals who will describe a complex narrative as being, beyond reproach or scientifically accurate, when it's not something that is even necessarily subject to scientific scrutiny. Like, the facts may be appropriate, but now all of a sudden we're inserting our own moral judgments, our own ideological components that are not evidence-based.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. We just have to recognize that is what's happening. And I think we don't do a great job of that. And, Steve, I'd be curious, one of the things as a psychologist that I do with my patients that I think is a good, I don't want to call it a buffer, but good practice for fighting against, mitigating, protecting, preventing
Demolishing.
against, well, not demolish. That's the thing. Like, I don't want to demolish confirmation bias because it exists. Instead of saying, I'm going to cut this out, which is, I think, futile, what we should be saying is, I want to recognize it. But I think one of the best ways to recognize it, to be aware with it, and to really grapple with it is to practice the discomfort that comes from uncertainty and from ambivalence.
Mm-hmm.
Sit in the unknown. Sit in those times when you feel two opposing feelings about the same thing. And don't force yourself, which many people do when they have cognitive dissonance, to choose.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to say, these things can be true at the same time, or it's okay that I'm not, fully investing in one feeling over the other. And the more that you can do that, I think the less reactive you are when you come across opposing viewpoints, and the more you can put together a narrative of lots of different information without needing to become polarized ideologically in how you do it.
Yeah, it's tough.
Sense. It's really hard to do. It takes a lot of practice.
Like one of the conversations we were having online was, who's to blame for the current backlash against vaccines and mainstream medicine? Like, I was blaming RFK Jr. as being now a major architect of what's going on, as a major driver, and other people are arguing that no, it was the mismanagement of COVID. And again, we got to this point where it's like, yeah, these are all the facts, but it's how does that add up to? Like, what was the effect of all of those things? It's kind of, we get this into this all the time where it's like, yeah, there is scientific fraud. And yeah, pharmaceutical companies put their thumb on the scale of research. Like, these are proven facts. But like, we don't think that adds up to a big pharma conspiracy, but other people do. It's like they just have a different narrative than we have. We have a more of a scientific skeptical narrative. They have an alternative medicine conspiracy-laden narrative.
Right.
And they could be based upon the same set of facts, But
you're right, with a lot of differences in how we weight the evidence.
Exactly, how you weight the evidence. And they think it's like dominant, and they say, yeah, it's not dominant, but it's there, but we can overcome it. It's not a deal killer.
And we also don't see it as unique to medicine.
Right.
Like, we know that when you are in a system that is a capitalist system like we are in, there will always be an incentive to cheat the system to make more money.
Yeah.
So we have to root that out in every field.
Absolutely.
And there are places where it is more dire when that happens.
But some people say, I don't trust any corporation. That's their narrative, anti-corporate, because they or again, I was just talking with somebody today, the government lies. Okay. But does that mean they lie 100% of the time?
Well, it depends what part of the government you're talking about.
And also, does it?
Well, that's an enormous net.
That's a pretty simplistic algorithm you have there.
Right. And you can say, I don't trust politicians. Yeah. And you can also say, I will still engage civically.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, I don't trust politicians, therefore there is no point to vote.
Right. Therefore, I'm taking my marbles and going home.
Exactly.
But also, all right, one final word, then we really do have to move on. But this is so deep, we could spend the whole show talking about it. Think about racism or sexism or whatever. And because I've seen this in action, talking to somebody who, by my judgment, they're a racist, let's say. And like they notice every time something happens that fits their racist narrative, and they remember it and they amplify it. And it's like, okay, I'm not saying that guy who got arrested wasn't black, but I just don't think that is indicative of a racial trait or whatever. You know what I mean? They're just weaving it into their pre-existing narrative about racism.
And that's also a perfect example of remembering the hits and not the misses.
Yeah.
Because that's, it's, cherry picking on steroids for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So every day you need to think about confirmation bias. It is so pervasive. Just really, really think about it and how you process and remember and think about information.
And be very happy that science somehow finds a way to transcend confirmation bias and actually make progress.
That's what all of science is about, man. It's controlling for biases like that.
Exactly.
That's the whole idea. All right, Jay, NASA is once again iterating their plans for going to the moon.
Yeah, this typically frustrates me, but this one doesn't.
That's because what I'm about to tell you is going to make several people happy that are hosting this podcast right now.
I hope it's me. I hope it's me.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I read this, and I'll just get to it. So NASA wants a moon base and a nuclear spaceship. And this is real, The only suspect part
And they
of
want
it,
it now.
I was just going to say, the only suspect part of it, of course, is the timeline, because they clearly don't fully meet their timelines. But NASA just announced, major change to its current space plans. Instead of thinking of the moon as, a place where the astronauts would kind of go and leave and not have it be too substantial, the agency now wants, hold your breath, to start building a lasting presence on the lunar surface. Oh, the applause are amazing. So
I mean, they were kind of leaning in that direction, right?
Not as strongly as I previously thought, Bob. I guess, this information coming out showed me that it wasn't, as permanent or as aggressive as I originally thought it was. So what they're doing is they're shifting away from their earlier focus on the Gateway. That was the planned station that would orbit the moon.
Station, right? And you go up and down to the surface, which sounded cool.
Yeah, that sounded very cool. And when that came out, I was psyched about it. But I'm more psyched about this. So what they want to do is they just want to put more time and attention on building a moon base, and they want to build it in stages. Now, NASA is also saying, I'm going to get to both of these topics. They're also saying that they want to send a spacecraft called Space Reactor 1 Freedom. They want to send it to Mars in 2028 using a nuke.
2028 with a person with people?
They didn't say. Probably not.
All right. This is the reason for that. Because in reading up on this, a lot of times they said by the end of Trump's term. So that is the reason for the timing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Of course. He also just signed.
This is all
he also
political.
just got
Yeah, it's a lot political, yeah.
sorry, did you guys just see it happen right while we were signing on? That he's changing precedent and putting his signature on the money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw that.
What?
What
Right?
money?
Not the Secretary of the
well,
Treasury?
maybe
First time
both.
ever.
I don't
First
know.
time ever.
So, I know that sounds like a wildly different thing, but it's not. It's not any different than what you're talking about, Jay. It's hubris. I did that.
Yep. I know.
And if NASA's leveraging that to get commitments, even though it will not be done by the end of his term, that's fine. But a lot of this announcement that, we're going to do all this cool stuff while Trump is still in office. That's what they're explicitly stating.
Well, so to finish what I was saying, so this Space Reactor 1 Freedom, right? That vessel is going to be a nuke electric propulsion. It's a new way of powering and moving a spacecraft. I think it's really cool, and it's not speculation.
Oh my God.
This is what they're saying, and this is NASA. So they said it directly in a public announcement on March 24th, man. So this is the real deal. So the moon side of the plan, it's pretty straightforward. NASA says it wants to build a more lasting presence on the lunar surface. They want to do it in stages. They want to begin it with robotic missions and then expanding toward a longer-term human-based operation there.
So, Jay, I assume that there's been no mention of lava tubes on the moon.
I didn't see anything, Bob, but that's in
That
their
pisses me off.
that's in their potential plans. I can't confirm or deny that they've outruled that. I mean, it just sounds like they've changed direction and they don't seem to have it all completely sussed out yet. But I
hope they take that seriously because, man, that's the way to go, in my opinion.
I thought that was the plausible solution.
It solves so many problems, many problems.
But it has problems of its own,
More importantly, though, Jay, is it going to be called Moonbase Alpha?
Steve, they're not ever going to do it.
So.
They had so many chances. It's just not going to happen. According to Reuters, they reported that this mission would cost $20 billion, and I don't believe it for a second because it's going to cost a lot more than $20 billion. I don't know who they're kidding.
That's confirmation.
I think they're just taking the budget from the Gateway and saying we're going to use that money to make a base on the moon.
Sure.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if $20 billion was exactly what they spec'd out Gateway to be, because they're just clearly moving away from Gateway, and then they're focusing more on directly on the surface of the moon. Which, look, if it's Gateway seemed to have a purpose, right? It was going to be literal gateway to the moon, so you'd always lay over there and then take another ship down to the surface. But I think they're just going to go right down to the surface now.
Huh.
And that might be because
technology has advanced faster than they thought. Who knows? I'll be on the lookout for that. They haven't released every detail, of course, but even the Gateway web pages, they're being updated to reflect this new Artemis architecture. So it's looks like this is it. This is going to be it. The nuke spacecraft is the part that makes, I think, all of us that love space travel, we get a little verklempt here because it sounds almost too good to be true. Like the moon mission, of course, to me, that is my favorite part of this. But to have this new craft, Freedom, be powered by nuclear fission, man, a reactor. It's going to be the propulsion that they're going to use.
It's just so far superior in so many important ways to chemical rockets that
So and it's not just that, but they're saying that they're going to use a reactor on the moon because if there's 2 weeks of no sunlight where they put them, for example, this is a surefire way that they will get constant power. The solar panels can only collect so much if they're on a ship. If you're getting farther away from the Earth, even less sunlight gets there, and it is a significant difference in how much solar energy you can turn into electricity when you start going out to Mars. So I just think this is one hell of a change. I really hope someday we can find out exactly why they decided to do this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I get the feeling that we don't really know what the hell's going on. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we would have to talk to somebody who actually knows what's going on, but the people who really know probably wouldn't be at liberty to give us the straight.
Well, I don't know, Steve. The few times that we've pulled people from NASA, they did give us information.
No, I agree. So I think we should do that. No, we're trying to do that. We're trying to get people who are a little bit more on the inside to tell, all right, what's really going on here. Yeah. But even then, I don't know if we're going to get the actual, in the room where it happens kind of story. You know what I mean?
But
okay, because some of this is deemed to be classified, I suppose.
Yeah, well, they've got to. They don't say anything until they've gotten things progressed to a certain point. I think once they make an announcement like this, it's what they're doing. It's a big deal too, to reshape the Artemis missions at this stage in the game. It's a big deal. Yeah. It's like this thing has been in the works for a very long time. They're saying they want a reactor on the lunar surface by 2030. They're making a lot of
They could do that. They could do that because they already have prototypes and plans and stuff for these nuclear power sources. That's been worked on for many years at this point. So I'm not worried about making that happen. But the nuclear rocket, I'm probably going to be talking about this next week in much more detail.
Yeah.
But I'm going to see. I don't know where we are with this type of nuclear electric propulsion, but I'll be finding out very soon.
And one last thing. So NASA's Office of Inspector General, they said this month that both human landing system providers like SpaceX and Blue Origin, they have faced delays. There's technical difficulties. They have integration challenges that could affect the cost and the timelines. And that office also said that NASA still does not have a way to rescue stranded Artemis crew if there was a catastrophic emergency, right? They're on the moon, something horrible goes on, and how do we get those people back to Earth? So, of course, we have to take everything that NASA is proposing here with a grain of moon regolith, okay? But I'm excited, guys, because, I don't know. I don't know why, for people in my generation that are science nerds, that we have such a fixation for a moon base. It probably was based on TV shows, right?
Sure, man.
Well, I think we wished maybe something came of that from the Apollo.
I think, because when the Apollo mission ended, we were thinking, what's next? A base on the moon. And then Space 1999 came out. I was like, by the 80s, 90s, we're going to have a base on the moon. And here we are, 50 years later, 60 years later, nothing. And so...
But we're closer than we ever were, Steve.
Well, I'd like to think so. And it's better than them saying we're canceling everything. But... I think the probability of what they say they're going to do actually happening is pretty low. I think we're probably going to have more changes in plan ahead. Yeah. And, again, unfortunately, like every time the administration changes, it's like, everything's up in the air again. It's hard to sustain these big, long projects over multiple administrations without there being major changes. And I think all these timelines we're hearing are BS. That's all political. So we'll see. I do think we're getting to the point now where so much has changed and it's such in flux. We really need to talk to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about here. Because the news reports we're getting is just press releases at this point.
Yeah, I don't know how they built the pyramids in the Great Wall of China over so much time. How do they sustain that effort? I don't know.
They were a forward-thinking people, unlike us.
That'd be good to have like fake news from history, like funding for the Great Wall of China cut.
The Onion. Right?
Yeah.
Kara, do you know that the Great Wall of China is not kind of like a straight line that goes from point A to point B?
Oh yeah, haven't you seen like imagery? If anybody has what's a good way to put this? An Apple TV. You guys probably don't use Apple TV at home, do you?
Yeah, I have Apple TV.
That's my
Apple?
Streamer or whatever the service that I use connected to my TV. And one of the screensavers is a beautiful like aerial image of the Great Wall, and it's very zigzaggy.
Yeah, if you
it's multiple walls. It's many
and it's disconnected
walls.
too.
It's a bunch of different wall segments is what it is.
And even the
you grew
portions
up-
that are segmented are very zigzaggy.
If you grew up thinking like the Great Wall of China is this one meandering wall that goes from roughly point A to point B, do yourself a favor. You will be shocked
wrong.
at how wacky this web of walls are. And if you read about the history of it and why it ended up that way and everything, it's even more wacky, but it's a fun story.
Sense.
It really is the Great Walls of China.
Yeah,
Yep,
that's true.
for sure.
All right, Kara, tell us about the limits of cloning.
Ooh, this is such an interesting story, and I'm like, ooh, how deep do I go? Okay.
Start with Dolly.
Did you guys? We will be talking about Dolly. Do you guys
yay,
remember the
Dolly.
film Multiplicity?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah,
Keaton,
1996.
starred in
Michael
that.
Keaton, Andy McDowell. Do you remember what the concept of that movie was? What was the
Nope.
conceit? You don't?
He made clones of himself. He
Sorry.
made duplicates of himself.
Yeah.
Well,
And were they
Yeah.
stupider? Each one was stupider than the original?
Yes. So and they
Wait, copy of a
explained it in the
copy of a
movie that it was a copy of a copy. And I don't know if we have listeners today who don't use copy machines.
Really? No, don't say that.
Or like if you've ever looked at a fax, right? And the resolution goes way
no.
down. I know. I'm sorry. I'm aging myself. But if you take a copy and you make a copy of that copy, and then you make a copy of that copy. So I'm not saying copy the original over and over, because then you'll have a bunch of copies that look pretty similar if you use the same machine. But if you make a copy of a copy of a copy, the quality starts to diminish over time. And this has long been thought as a kind of natural limit to cloning itself. And it's based on something called Muller's ratchet theory, which is a model that predicts that when reproduction occurs asexually, especially in mammals, there are mutations, deleterious mutations, that start to accumulate over time. And this is an inevitable fact. And ultimately, the mutations will become so burdensome that the lineage won't be able to persist. And that kind of that animal, which has been undergoing asexual reproduction, will go extinct. So some researchers in Japan, this is so fascinating, back not long after Dolly the sheep, do you guys remember when Dolly happened?
Was that?
1999?
I think it was before that.
Yeah, I thought it was earlier than that.
96?
Yeah, 1996, Scottish researchers, after 276 attempts, finally were able to produce Dolly. And Dolly is a lamb that was produced from the udder cell of a 6-year-old sheep. Since then, do you guys know?
That was big news.
Huge
at the time.
news.
Boy, that was big.
Since then, do you guys know what other animals, I should say mammals, have been cloned? Because there have been a lot of non-mammals that have been cloned.
Nice.
Oh, like
Did they clone
dogs
it?
and pigs and
Dogs, yep, cat, deer, rabbits.
a bunch, man.
mules.
I lost track after a while.
I think even a rhesus monkey. But a rhesus monkey didn't use somatic nuclear transfer. They used embryo splitting. But these researchers decided to work on mice. And it wasn't long after Dolly, once kind of the code was cracked, they said, okay, we're going to start doing our own cloning experiments here in Japan. And one of the experiments we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of a copy of a copy and see how long we can do that for.
Oh,
I know.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with this study.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
That's not unethical.
they're
is it?
mice. We use cloned mice all the time in research. All the time. Actually, this is an important question to ask. What happens when you make a clone of a clone, and how long can you keep going, and how, what does that do to the organisms themselves and to their genetic lineage? So just to remind everybody, does everybody kind of fully understand what a clone is? And that cloning, insofar as we do it in laboratory research, is a mechanism we use in some ways to reproduce something that happens in nature all the time. What organisms do we know that reproduce in a similar manner to how we clone animals?
Oh, interesting.
Well, anything that reproduces asexually, right?
Exactly. Bacteria. But sometimes and these researchers will refer to, which I don't really like, as lower organisms, which kind of bums me out.
Yeah.
Sometimes with these organisms that reproduce asexually, or even organisms that don't reproduce asexually in nature, but have been induced to reproduce asexually in the lab, non-mammalian animals, and especially like insects and worms and research animals of that nature, they are able to push that boundary really far. But there's been a question about how many times you can make a copy of a copy, a clone of a clone in a mammal, and what actually happens to the genetic material in that organism. So how do we clone mammals artificially? There's 3 different kinds. There's gene cloning, reproductive cloning, and therapeutic cloning. Here, what we're talking about is actually reproductive cloning. So the kind of main way that it's generally done is through something called somatic cell nuclear transfer. It's the most common technique. It's what they did for Dolly, and it's what these researchers did. And that's where they actually take an egg, they take the nucleus, the genetic material, out of the egg, they enucleate it, and they transfer that nucleus into a donor somatic cell. So that could be like a skin cell or a blood cell or a cumulus cell. That nucleus from that donor cell is inserted into an empty egg. And then that egg is stimulated. It's kind of like induced to grow as if it's been fertilized, and eventually differentiate and develop and hopefully be born and then continue to develop. So we're taking nuclear material out of a somatic cell, somatic meaning not germline, right? Meaning from somewhere in the body that's not the reproductive organs. And then it's put into basically an empty egg. And then that, through a series of different factors, and when I say factors, I mean like chemicals. It's induced to continue to develop and grow. And there are other types of things like embryo splitting and freeze-dried cell techniques. But in this case, we're talking about somatic cell nuclear transfer.
And it's growing in a womb.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, it's put in a womb. Well,
yeah.
What else is it going to grow in?
Well, I don't know if we have artificial wombs that work for certain animals yet.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think it's just easier to do it in a living mouse, because a lot of those factors are actually naturally produced then. And so what they did is they made a copy of a copy, and they did it over and over and over. And does anybody want to guess at what point they couldn't do it anymore? How many generations?
45.
Close.
46.
58.
58. Okay.
They made it to 58 generations. 20 years of experimentation.
Wow.
Ultimately, they produced,
20.
I think, over 1,200. I guess we could call them offspring.
What was the 57th like?
Well, the 57th was interesting because that's where things really went to hell. So they did start to notice early on that the clones of the clones seemed pretty normal, both behaviorally, from a lifespan perspective. They really didn't see a lot of concerns. But then as they kept going, there was sort of an inflection point where they saw the birth rate decline, and that was at the 27th generation. They kept pushing, and they kept pushing, and sort of around 57, things were getting real bad, right? The birth rate was like in the toilet. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to produce any more, and they just couldn't sustain beyond 58 generations. They all died, and they weren't able to keep cloning. They did notice some interesting kind of takeaways because, of course, they didn't just clone these animals for 20 years and write down who lived and who died and write up their results and publish. These are, genomic researchers, and they wanted to understand what's going on genetically with these organisms. Why is this happening? They found that there was a massive accumulation of sort of mutations, right? These DNA abnormalities. They still don't fully understand the mechanisms, but they do know that, in order to even do this experiment, they actually had to promote something called nuclear reprogramming using an epigenetic modification reagent. Nuclear reprogramming, have you guys ever heard of that process, nuclear reprogramming?
In this context,
it's something we do all the time. So basically, we have both our epigenome and we have our genome, right? And do you know the difference between the two?
The genome codes for proteins, right?
And genome is it's fundamental, right? It's fundamental inheritance that is kind of not always as readily subject to environmental cues. Whereas the epigenome is full of what are sometimes referred to as like tags, where genetic information can go from generation to generation, but like genes can be turned on and off based on these environmental cues. And we didn't even used to think the epigenome existed. Like, we didn't know that epigenetics was real. It felt very Lamarckian. It felt like we were that had been debunked. But we now know that there is both a genomic lineage and an epigenomic lineage. But epigenes typically are reprogrammed over and over. And that's because, eggs and sperm, they develop from cells that have specific gene expression profiles. Like, their genetic information is present within this embryo, and it needs to be able to grow in a healthy way early on with the coding that's there. And so the body actually physically wipes the epigenetic tags during certain key times in development. Sometimes it's even referred to as like a genetic blank slate. But this doesn't occur 100% of the time. We do reprogram most epigenetic tags so that a fertilized cell can develop into any type of body cell, because if it was carrying all those epigenetic tags, it wouldn't be pluripotent, right? It wouldn't be like, I want to be skin, or I want to be hair, or it would be like, I'm going to be all the things that these tags are telling me to be. But about 1%, from what I've read, of genes escape epigenetic reprogramming through a process called imprinting. And so the researchers of this study, they were able to sort of induce further reprogramming using an epigenetic modification reagent. And that promotion of nuclear reprogramming helped them increase the generations of mice that they could clone. Because back in the day, early studies showed that like serial cloning just wasn't possible. Like, after a few generations, the copies of the copies were fully multiplicity, right? Like shaving their tongues, like in the movie. But so through this reprogramming, they've been able to really extend that, and they're continuing to push the limits. Now, we have to remember that when they started this experiment 20 years ago, they didn't have the tools they have now. Yeah. And so anytime you do a longitudinal experiment like this, there's going to be improvements in the actual methodology over time. I should say methods. We got a weird email about that, but I'm not going to go off on that tangent right now. To the emailer, I hear you. The methods, not the methodology. Ooh. And so what these individuals did is they reprogrammed so that they could clone and then reclone and then reclone and then reclone. And then they did something interesting as everything started to break down. And that's that they took that final generation of recloned mice and they actually mated them with males. So they brought them back into a sexual reproduction framework. And they were able to fertilize the oocytes within these cloned mice. And yes, most of the embryos degenerated, but a few embryos were normalized, as they say, by the meiotic process and fertilization, and they developed full term. So the researchers, are taking from this that animals, and well, specifically mammals, rely on sexual reproduction. We need that variance that comes about by sexual reproduction and by the meiotic process, right? And now we know, I don't think we can say beyond a shadow of the doubt, 58 generations is the cutoff, 1,200 mice. That's the only thing you can do. But they did show that as of the advancements that we have right now, the technology that we're working with, they couldn't push beyond 58. And, they are sort of enforcing, I guess you could say, or reiterating the theory, Muller's ratchet theory, that asexual lineages, they just cannot persist after a certain point, and narrowing in on what that certain point is, I guess will be up to other labs to see if they can beat their record, or if they can show that it's different in different species, for example. Oh, and just another interesting number. So they did more than 30,000 nuclear transfer attempts across those 58 generations. And as far as they know, this was the first empirical demonstration of what is predicted by Muller's ratchet, this concept of mutational meltdown.
As an aside, I always hate how it's such a movie trope that when you clone somebody, first of all, an adult pops out and they have all the memories of the
God, I know, right?
That's right. Give me a break.
Oh yeah, that's ridiculous. No.
That shit.
And luckily, that's not the case, because I got to tell you guys, and bear with me here for a second, but little Killer, he's going to be 16 in May. We're going to throw him a sweet 16, maybe get him a Barbie dream car. I'm not sure. But I love this little dude. And when I got his DNA test, they told me that he is like 40% mixed beyond recognition. Like they couldn't even pin down how incredibly mutt-ish this dog is, which is a great thing. And he's been so healthy. He's a smart, sweet companion who has just he's the best dog you could ask for. And I got to tell you, when I hear about people cloning their dogs, I used to think it was weird. And now I'm like, well,
whoa.
If they met Killer, I have a friend who cloned their dog, which is like amazing and bananas, but they had a purebred boxer. And I was like, well, couldn't you just get another one? Like, I'm not saying it's the exact same, but it's pretty close, right? But there is no other Killer. The only way to get another killer is to clone him.
And like every time one of my dogs has died, it's of course very sad, and you would love to get that dog back. But then I get the next dog, and I fall in love with them, and they're even better. The way I see every dog you own is a unique experience, and you shouldn't deprive yourself of that because you're trying to recapture the last one.
I agree. From a psychological perspective,
to put on a dog or a cat.
Yeah,
a lot of pressure.
I don't want the next dog to be Killer, but it would be nice if it was Killer's brother, And that's really what cloning affords you, a genetically identical creature that is now going to have their own epigenetic experiences and changes. And so, I don't know. I won't do it. I think it's still pretty expensive.
It is. Wasn't it 20,000 last time I heard? Is it less than that?
Oh, my God. I mean, people pay close to that for like designer breeds.
Yeah, you can get a dog for $100.
Dog breeding is its own horror show. And
I'm not to diminish anything that you're saying, Kara, but like, there's a lot of dogs that need rescue out there.
No, I know. And Killer was a rescue.
Rescue your dogs, please.
Yeah, Killer was a rescue, and I'll get another rescue. There'll be some time in between, though. I don't think I could dive right into that right away.
We said that too, and then when you see a puppy on Puppy Find, you're like, I want that dog.
Yeah. I've lasted a long time.
That's true.
But
That's true,
I do have a
Bob.
cat, but...
Yeah. All right, well, Bob, in the meantime, tell us about these giant insects.
All right, guys, this was a fun item to research. So new research has produced interesting evidence that those huge prehistoric insects millions of years ago, you guys heard about those? They may have gotten so big for reasons that are much more complicated than just the fact that there was a ridiculous amount of oxygen in the atmosphere at that time.
Oh.
So this is from an international team of researchers, including ASU School of Life Science professor John Harrison. The name of the paper is oxygen supply through the tracheolar muscle system does not contain insect gigantism. The last two words are the fun words in that damn title. But let me give you the setting, though. So we have 300 million years ago. The continents have coalesced into the Pangea, right?
Whoa.
You've heard of that one. So this is the end of the Paleozoic era, and which is roughly the Carboniferous period, and then into the Permian period. Okay. The periods after the Permian were what? We all have heard these. Everyone has Triassic,
Jurassic, and
Cretaceous.
Oh, Cretaceous.
yeah. The two here are just Triassic and Jurassic. But yeah, we're not even worried about those. The ones before that, Carboniferous and Permian. That's what we're talking about. Okay, 300 million years ago, dinosaurs were as far off in the future as they are in our past right now. You follow that?
Yes.
So obviously there are no birds or bats. And if you looked up in the sky, if you're going to see anything flying around, it's going to be insects. That's the only thing that was
And a
flying
big
at that
moon.
point. Yeah. I wonder how
Right?
big the moon was back then. Oof.
Oh, sorry.
Some nasty
tangent.
tides. Yeah. So some of those insects were absolute whoppers. Like they had a giant mayfly-like species. You guys know mayflies, right? You've seen them. They're kind of like mosquito-sized, 2 to
may
30
have.
millimeters, perhaps. Back then, they were 17 inches or 45 centimeter wingspan. Big boys, but that's really nothing compared to the iconic insect of that period, and that's the dragonfly-like flies that were called griffin flies. They were not dragonflies, they were griffin flies, largest insect ever. Today, if you look at an equivalent dragonfly, for example, they're roughly palm-sized, right? Roughly palm-sized, you'd say. The griffin fly, the body was 43 centimeters or 17 inches. 17-inch long, skinny body, right? The wingspan, 75 centimeters, 2.5 feet. 2.5 feet.
Thanks.
This was a big boy. Who remembers the movie Caveman with Ringo Starr?
Oh my gosh, Bob.
There was an iconic scene where a huge dragonfly-like insect lands on his face, one of the characters' faces. Oh my God, that's exactly what it was. So these are Meganisoptera, which is an extinct order. So that order is gone. It's no longer with us. The dragonfly, for example, is the order is Odonata. So different order, but otherwise a type of insect, informally known as griffin flies, and often, probably most often, incorrectly identified as giant dragonflies because they were not dragonflies. Okay, these guys, I mean, that big. I've heard varying things about what they could eat, but some sites are saying that they could have feasted on small vertebrates, amphibians, mammals. Why do you think they were so big? What do you guys think? Why they were so big?
So something beyond the oxygen.
Well, that is the answer that I've always read. I think that's the conventional wisdom. The oxygen tension in the atmosphere was higher at the time.
Is that why or how, though?
Well, that's
Yeah, is it
how.
why or
That is
how?
how. Well, the thing is, they
Yeah.
get it. That allowed insects to get that big, and some of them did. Not all of them, but some. You know, that means the upper limit of size was increased, and you can see insects of every size and shape. So that's because oxygen passively diffuses. They don't have lungs, right? And so you need a gradient, and that's as big as the gradient would allow. That's the conventional wisdom until now, apparently.
Yeah, so it started really in the 80s because that's when they developed this new technique to reconstruct the constituents of ancient atmospheres. And that's when they realized that, 300 million years ago, roughly, there was a lot of atmospheric oxygen out there, about 45% instead of, what is it now, like low 20%? I mean, so that's a huge, more than doubling the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. And there were certainly more fires back then. They're pretty sure about that. And then in 1995, there was a study released in Nature, and they were saying in that study that this high oxygen content of the atmosphere was coincided with these ultra large insects. So they proposed at that time in the mid-90s that the large insects needed all of this extra atmospheric oxygen. So that's kind of where that common wisdom of like they needed the oxygen to be that big. That's when it kind of got baked in, and people who have heard about it, that's exactly what they heard. And it made a lot of intuitive sense, and Steve kind of alluded to it. Insects do not breathe like we breathe. They do not have lungs. They have a trachea, and which is basically these branching air tubes, and those brachii eventually will branch into smaller and smaller things called tracheoles, and these are the finest tubes, kind of like capillaries in a sense.
Tracheoles or tracheoles?
Tracheoles. These tracheoles are the finest tubes, only like 5 to maybe I think a couple hundred nanometers, really, really small, and they actually penetrate the flight muscle cells. These are the only tracheoles that actually will go into the cells, and I think they needed to get really close to the mitochondria. And then, as Steve said, the oxygen would diffuse across, the carbon dioxide would diffuse away, and the oxygen would diffuse directly into the muscle cells and mitochondria. So it was easy to believe, for scientists to believe, that this diffusion process would be much more efficient and better if there was more oxygen in the atmosphere, especially for these large insects. So that's why it was kind of intuitive. It made some sort of intuitive sense that the large insect bodies needed a lot of extra oxygen. So that's kind of where we've been since essentially 1995. So then this latest research, Edward Snelling of the University of Pretoria, he used a high-power electron microscope, and he measured the space taken up by tracheoles in muscle tissue for modern insects. And he and his team looked at 44 insect species across 10 insect orders. So they looked at thousands of these micrographs, I think they called them, and then they took that information and they kind of extended that they extended that to the griffin flies, right? To these big, huge dragonfly-like insects. They kind of extrapolated in what would they be like. So their findings were that the space that's taken up by these oxygen-delivering tracheoles, right? Because imagine you've got these little super tiny tubes that are going into the muscle, and if you look at how much space of the muscle are those tracheoles actually taking up, and they found that it was 1% or less in most modern insects. So there's not a lot of the muscle that is taken up by these tubes that are going in to feed it oxygen. They did find that the bigger the insects are, generally speaking, there would be a negligible increase in the tracheoles. You would need, some of them or most of them had more of the tracheoles, but not much. And actually, it was insignificant, an insignificant increase going from the smallest insects to the largest insects. We got some big insects. I mean, the praying mantis is like, 18, 19 inches long, some of those guys. So we've got some big boys that are alive now, that not as big as the griffin fly, but considerable, kind of freaky looking for sure. I mean, if you had that on your hand, you'd be like, whoa. Now, so they believe that this low percentage, this 1% percentage of the muscle taken up by these tracheoles would also apply and can extrapolate it to the griffin flies, and assuming that extrapolation holds. That's an assumption, and that's probably one of the biggest assumptions I came across, is that going from modern flies and extrapolating it to the bigger extinct flies, that pattern still makes sense. So if the griffin flies had only slightly more of those tracheoles than modern big insects, right, which is what their extrapolation suggests, that sure, the big ones would have some extra tracheoles, but not much at all. It's suggested that to the researchers then that the flight muscles did not need half of their atmosphere to be oxygen, because those tracheoles took up so much little space of the muscle itself that it would have been easier for selective pressure to create more tracheoles, and they didn't. In their extrapolation, they wouldn't need those extra tracheoles, okay, extrapolating from the modern insects. Lead author Edward Snelling said, if atmospheric oxygen really set a limit on the maximum body size of insects, then there ought to be evidence of compensation at the level of the tracheoles. He continues, there's some compensation occurring in larger insects, but it's trivial in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, there were more tracheoles in bigger modern insects, but it was such a tiny increase that it probably would not have made the griffin flies have an absurd amount of these tracheoles in order to beat those huge wings. So now remember, though, this is as I said, this is based on a reasonable extrapolation, right? They didn't directly measure fossil soft tissue because there is none for these guys. The fossils are big and beautiful, but you can't you can't interrogate the tracheoles with a microscope because that data is just not there in the fossils.
We need one trapped in amber.
Oh man, imagine that. That would be so cool. I'll be a big blob of amber though.
Yeah, that's
I guess not. You just need a bit of it. You just need a bit of a bit of the flight muscle, and that's all you would need.
But to have the whole thing would be cooler, Bob.
Yeah. But here's another thing that you guys need to remember. A lot of people, and even I initially conclude that griffin flies could survive in our atmosphere, and that such high oxygen levels were not that important, right? If you transported one to modern day atmosphere, would it survive? We don't know actually, because this data doesn't really address that. It only showed that getting oxygen to the flight muscles was probably not the critical limiting factor as it was thought to be, right? Because if you talk to an expert in this field before the study, he would say, yeah, getting the oxygen to the flight muscles, that was the critical point where you needed all of this oxygen in the atmosphere. And now this is basically ruled out to, I think their confidence levels are pretty high. It seems like a pretty solid study. So they're fairly confident. So that's almost basically just ruled out at this point. So, but that's all that they're ruling out. It's the oxygen to the flight muscles. And who knows what else was going on in these insects. Scientists are going to have to look elsewhere for why these giant insects existed. Looking at the flight muscles really isn't going to help. Perhaps some people have suggested that there's an oxygen limit elsewhere in the respiratory system, maybe upstream from the tracheae. There's something there that needs a lot more oxygen. They're not sure. If it turns out that oxygen did not limit this maximal insect size, then they're going to have to look at other culprits. For example, predation by vertebrates, maybe vertebrates and other creatures. I guess birds started about 150 million years ago, so I don't know how long these insects lived, but if they lived long enough to be in the air when early birds took to flight, then I'm sure they would gobble them up. They probably were quite yummy. And somebody also mentioned something about perhaps there's some biomechanical support limits on the exoskeleton of the insect. I didn't see too much confirmation on that one. So there you go. So that common trope that these insects needed the oxygen, one of the major components of that argument seems to have been ruled out, but who knows? It's still more complicated, and they still can't definitively say that they really needed all that oxygen. But it still was an interesting study. Hope you liked hearing about it.
So now I have to unremember this.
No, I think this is a reasonable inference from the data that they have.
Needs more.
But there's a lot of assumptions in there, as you were saying.
That extrapolation is big. Yeah. Who knows? Once you reach a critical limit in size, to get to that size, maybe you can't have a smooth curve. They're going from modern day insects up to the size of the ancient one. So that's definitely an extrapolation.
I think this is not the final word. And it's still a good inference from the fact that these maximum insect size does correlate with oxygen tension in the atmosphere. It would seem like an amazing coincidence if those two things were not causally related. So I'm not willing to say bye-bye to that theory based upon this one study.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that surprised me was that looking at a huge range of insects, modern day insects, and from smallest to largest, there was a negligible increase in tracheoles.
All right, Evan. Mm-hmm. The Catholic Church still doing exorcisms?
Oh, the Catholic Church is still doing exorcisms. There was a head of exorcism within the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. That position is probably still active, but I'll get to that. There is an old expression that has stuck with me for many, many years. Medieval beliefs yield medieval results. And the reason that it's stuck with me all these years is because I came up with the expression. I've been saying it for the better part of 2 decades, and I hope some others have borrowed it. You're free to do so, and I think it's good to do because it's true. And I bring out this saying most often when the subject of exorcisms is talked about on the show. And much like any of the other classic skeptical topics that rear their ugly heads on a regular basis, we find that once again, exorcism is in the news. And where there's exorcism, the news is rarely good, as far as I'm concerned. Pope Leo XIV has hosted an exorcist summit at the Vatican over fears of worldwide surges in Satanism. So reads one headline, and there's a lot of different headlines about this meeting that took place. Catholic exorcists are urging the Vatican to appoint a trained exorcist in every diocese around the world. So they want one position at every. How many are there? How many dioceses around the world? Tens of thousands, maybe? I don't know. So, right, we're not talking about them limiting exorcisms or tighter restrictions on them, nor a shift towards either medical or psychiatric explanations for what's going on. No, the solution is you need more exorcists. In case there are maybe a handful of people in our audience unfamiliar with what exorcism is, I will go ahead and remind us all that an exorcism is a religious ritual intended to expel what is believed to be an evil spirit, such as a demon or a devil, from a person, a place, or an object. And that practice is based on the belief in possession, or this idea that a supernatural entity can inhabit and control a human being or a place or an object, but in a human it will manifest itself through unusual behavior, such as altered speech or some form of physical distress. Now, exorcisms are not unique to Catholicism, but in the Western context, they are most commonly associated with the Roman Catholic Church, which does have a formalized rite involving prayers, commands directed at the alleged entity, plus the use of holy water and religious symbols in the rites. While officially regulated within some institutions, the practice also occurs informally, and it's often carried out by untrained individuals who interpret psychological or medical conditions as signs of possessions. There is an International Association of Exorcists, which is called the AIE. I don't know why I and A are reversed here, but that's how it reads. This was founded in 1990 by Father Gabriel Amorth, who I think we may have mentioned before on the show. He is claimed to have performed over 60,000 rites of exorcism during his 30-year run as the Vatican's chief exorcist.
How many?
Over 60,000. I saw some estimates as 170,000. Now, some of these rites are just simple prayers, right? So it varies. It's a spectrum. It's not like out of the movie, if that's what you're thinking about, in which he goes to the person and does a whole day's worth of stuff to them.
But sometimes it is like abusive, no?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it's a spectrum. It's absolutely a spectrum. But his organization, this AIE, has asked Pope Leo XIV to ensure that, of course, every Catholic diocese worldwide has one or more trained exorcists, because they say there is a rise in cases linked to occult practices and spiritual distress. Of course, that's what they're going to argue.
How many thousand did he perform?
60. I've seen the estimates are anywhere between 60,000 to 170,000.
So
that's more than one a day for decades.
That's so 60,000 is one a day for 164 years.
Yeah, but remember, it could be just a one-line prayer.
Correct. Yes.
And so he could knock out a bunch in a day.
I think he's probably counting group exorcisms as multiple different exorcisms.
Probably that too.
I was reading another report about him in which they claim where he had actually went to a place to visit and do the more larger whatever ceremony that exorcism takes on. 100 of those. They did it 100 times. That's over 30 years. That's a manageable number. So that I believe, but he's credited, with 60,000 or more. However you want to take that. So let's see. Father Francesco Belmonte is the vice president of this association, and in an interview about his meeting with the Pope, he said, "The spread of occultism in its various forms and of Satanism unfortunately opens doors and windows to the extraordinary action of the devil in today's world. This can cause grave suffering in those who imprudently turn to these practices through possible cases of possession, vexation, obsession, or diabolical infestation." So the premise, you like that one? The premise is that there's a growing number of people who are suffering because of these kinds of extraordinary actions of the devil and demons and what have you. And that without trained exorcists, those people are left vulnerable, and they'll potentially turn to what the church describes as inappropriate solutions, which could be a whole wide variety of things. I think the framing's important because it positions exorcism not as superstition, but as a necessary pastoral response to a real and growing problem. And we've seen this pattern before during periods of social stress, economic hardship, illness, isolation. People tend to have, there tend to be increases in the reporting of possessions that go along with these times in life. And therefore, if there's possession, then what? The solution is exorcism. So the two go hand in hand. Now, I've noted before in prior reports and talks about this that I've done that the clergy themselves observed a rise in exorcism requests during the COVID pandemic, which frankly are often tied to psychological distress rather than anything supernatural. Historically, the symptoms attributed to possession, which include convulsions, altered voices, unusual behavior, they tend to map extremely well into known neurological and psychiatric conditions, epilepsy, schizophrenia, dissociative disorders, among others. So it's not a new mystery. It's just an old misinterpretation, as it were. But exorcism, as you said, Kara, is definitely not harmless. As I said, it exists on a spectrum. On the one end, you have some what can be called benign rituals, prayers and blessings and symbolic acts. But on the other end, you have restraint, starvation, suffocation, physical violence, sometimes resulting in death. There is a real body count that is associated with exorcism. Recently, one example, a 3-year-old girl in California died after family members attempted to force demons out through hours of choking, gagging, and physical restraint.
3-year-old?
3-year-old
So sad.
little girl. Cause of death, officially, asphyxiation followed by prolonged abuse. So not an isolated case. Unfortunately, it's part of a larger pattern. When we hear for calls for expanding exorcism, I think you have to really ask, what are we expanding exactly? Because if possession is real, then perhaps more trained practitioners make sense if in that belief system. But if possession is not real, and there has never been a single scientifically verified case in recorded history of possession by a demon or some sort of entity, then what you're actually expanding on is a system that misidentifies what is most likely medical and psychological conditions and treating them as supernatural threats. And this has real consequences.
Yeah, the worst is when someone clearly has a psychiatric illness.
Yeah.
And as part of their delusion, usually people's delusions will align with their cultural beliefs and their religious beliefs and their family beliefs, etc. And so they may believe that they're possessed by a demon as part of their schizophrenia, let's say. The absolute worst thing you could do is reinforce their delusions by saying, yes, you are possessed, and I'm going to do an exorcism on you.
Right.
That's guaranteed to backfire.
100%.
That's
Right.
malpractice. That
So
is
dangerous.
absolutely
Yeah.
psychiatric malpractice. But I've seen it happen.
Yep.
We have. Steve, do you remember the doctor in Hartford,
course.
Connecticut?
Yeah.
That's our example of our experience.
One
with
we've had the most
someone
direct
local.
interaction with. That's correct.
Yep,
It's just horrible. Like I just say, it's medieval. It's terrible.
it is.
Okay, guys, I have a quick update on 3I Atlas, the third interstellar object to pass through our solar system.
Oh, Avi Loeb, right?
Avi Loeb, yes.
Here we
So,
go.
first I was like, hey, I wonder what's, at the end of the day, what do we know about Comet 3I Atlas? So as it was coming in, there's a lot of atypical features of it, and of course there is, because it's the first time we've seen an interstellar comet. Every other comet we've seen originated in our solar system, and so they have very typical features of comets that form in our solar system. This comet is different for a couple of reasons. First, it formed in a different part of the galaxy, right? It probably formed around a star that has low metallicity, and that's closer to the center of the galaxy, and it's also very old. It's probably 7 billion years old or so. And so it's older than our solar system. And it also been traveling through interstellar space for billions of years. So it may have collected stuff along the way. So of course it's different than comets that originate from within our solar system. But the more we observed it, the more it was clear that this was a comet. It behaved like a comet. It was right in all the important ways. It had a tail, it had a coma, it had its constituents were the stuff you would expect to see in a comet. And of course, every step of the way, Avi Loeb was trying to make grist out of, well, it's close to the ecliptic, or it's it's hiding from Earth, right? It's like, oh, when it's close to Earth, it's investigating Earth. When it's far from Earth, it's hiding from Earth. Yeah. Talk about confirmation bias and motivated reasoning. So,
bastard.
And everything he said turned out not to be true, right? Then he's like, well, maybe we'll know it's a spacecraft if after it passes from behind the sun, it makes a turn towards Earth. And of course it didn't. It's now headed out towards the orbit of Jupiter and out of our solar system. It's a comet. There's no question about that. So now the latest headlines. This is really like just from yesterday. Scan finds presence of nuclear fuel in 3I Atlas. Nuclear fuel.
What does that even mean?
What do you think it's referring to?
Nuclear
hydrogen?
Like hydrogen.
Yes. Yeah. What kind of hydrogen?
Well, like what the sun does,
atmosphere, right? Not atmosphere. The hydrogen you find in the solar system.
Deuterium.
Yeah, deuterium.
Okay.
It's an isotope of hydrogen with an extra proton, right? So deuterium. Now, deuterium occurs naturally. Right?
Okay.
Sure does.
This comet has slightly more deuterium than other comets that originate from within our solar system.
Oh.
Okay.
That's the
It's not quote-unquote nuclear fuel. It's just a different ratio of a naturally occurring substance. It's, again, but Avi Loeb was like, this is interesting. This isn't interesting that this is nuclear fuel, where in fusion you can combine deuterium and tritium to make...
That is reprehensible to use that term.
That is abusive.
It's
Is.
ridiculous.
That's so unprofessional and misleading.
Be a piece of alien
Talk
technology?
about confirmation bias.
Oh my Kaku, God. Man.
He's a crank. Yeah, at this point, I think this guy's just a crank. And then I think, he's just... hounding for fame and attention.
He's milking it for every last little piece he can get.
Damn, man.
Ooh, this guy.
It's pathetic.
But 3I Atlas is a comet. That's it. These anomalies are not anomalies, really. They're just, it's different than the comets that are typical of our solar system because it's an interstellar comet. That's it. And they're all, astronomical clues about its origin, and about its life. It's not evidence. Nothing is. It's even worth bringing up this idea that maybe this is evidence of alien technology. It's ridiculous. But here's the other thing. In this blog from yesterday or the day before, so all the time there are people sifting through the countless photos, hundreds, thousands of photos from the Mars rover, from satellites, whatever, looking for anything unusual. And somebody sent one of these pictures up the chain to Avi Loeb. It's a picture of the surface of Mars by the Mars rover, and I think the Curiosity rover. And there is what appears to be a small cylinder in the picture within the frame. It's over. So either that's just an optical kind of illusion type of thing. He says it has a flat surface. It doesn't really have a flat surface. Its surface is in shadow. You can't really tell what it is. And it's, we're only seeing it from one angle. It's like we see it from multiple angles. And he showed 4 pictures from the same angle. I know it looks. Well, maybe you're talking about a half a degree. What are you talking about? It looks the same.
Maybe they don't know what the word angle means.
To visual inspection, it looked the same to me. So it wasn't a completely different angle. It might have been just slightly different. I don't know. But in any case, I'll even stipulate, okay, it's probably an actual cylinder and not a natural formation. I'm not ruling out a natural formation, but let's say I agree to that. It's small. It's like 22 centimeters. There's a lot of space junk on Mars now, right? We sent a lot of probes and satellites, and there's a lot pieces of them fall off. The landers fall apart. It's almost certainly a piece. It
is a robot planet.
It's just a piece of junk from one of our previous missions. And Avi Loeb was playing this game where he says, just like he did with 3I Atlas, this is likely to be natural, but we can't rule out that it's intelligent, and we should be doing A, B, and C. So here he does the same thing. He says, this is likely to be man-made space junk, but the Curiosity rover should immediately turn around and go back and take a closer look at it. So now he's instructing NASA how to prioritize their, rover missions, because he's mystery mongering about something that is almost certainly just a piece of debris.
And don't you think the people who are spending their entire lives dedicated to the Mars projects they would be the ones to be able to make the call. Yeah,
of course.
Maybe we should go back. If they decided to not go back and take a second look, I think that's pretty a pretty good example of there's nothing there. Let's just keep going. There's nothing to be had. Nothing to be found. Of course.
So this is like, when people say, it's like, well, what do we lose by considering the hypothesis that something might be alien? And again, it's not, I'm all for projects like SETI or whatever that include technosignatures within the realm of things that they're thinking about when they examine the universe. Absolutely. But he's saying that this is likely enough that we need to redirect the Curiosity rover in order to make this a higher priority than whatever else NASA's doing with that at this point in time. That's ridiculous. He's just inserting himself into this, because it something they write about in his blog and it gets him attention. And he also is playing this game where he's being coy, saying it's likely to be space debris, but we should investigate it. So in the overwhelmingly likely case that it's space debris, he could say, well, that's what I said. It was probably space debris.
Yeah, right.
But in the infinitesimal probability that it's something more interesting, he could take credit for it. It's like, I told you we should go back and take a look at that.
Right. So
it's
now
just a win-win for him.
To say. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Same thing with 3i Atlas. It's likely to be a natural, but if anything is genuinely mysterious about it, he takes credit for it.
I mean, if that thing was churning out maybe plutonium or something, right? Maybe, but not deuterium.
I mean, it's a little more deuterium than we would expect to naturally occur on comets from our own solar system.
Right, but something you would probably not be surprised at all to find on a comet from another solar system. Yeah. I mean, it would actually be bizarre if it wasn't different in some ways like that.
To our system?
If it were identical, to native comets, that would
be more interesting.
It's just terrible. All right, Jay. It's Who's That Noisy time.
All right, guys. Last week I played This Noisy.
Whoa.
What do you think that is?
Is that called a klaxon or something?
I've developed a rule of thumb, is that when something sounds really otherworldly, it's probably been time altered in some way.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. That's not bad.
Right?
Steve.
Either sped up or slowed down.
Okay. I like where you're going with that, Steve. A listener named Bradford West wrote in and said, "Hey, Jay, cool noisy this week. It's definitely a cop car with a gibbon in it, except the cop car part." So he thinks it's a gibbon. Not a bad guess. But you are incorrect. Let's move on. Jay Williams wrote in and said, "Hey, there is a wind up and wind down sound, but sounds like it's struggling. I'm going with a siren that is being underpowered and sounds kind of sad." You are correct on everything except it's not a siren. But the way you described it was brilliant. Travis Martin wrote in. He said, "I will guess dolphin." Which I thought was very, very succinctly
mic drop. Yeah.
put right. Thank you. You are incorrect. That is not a dolphin. Andrew Denman wrote in, "Hey, Jay, I think the March 21st noisy is a lemur called an indri. I could be wrong, but I'm hoping my youth spent binging on nature documentaries won't let me down. Love the show." You are incorrect. And we did not have a winner.
Well,
no winner this week.
I don't know.
All right, you guys want to take a guess before I tell you what this is?
No winner. Don't reveal the answer. I think that should be the new
I see. So this is something called a screaming piha, P-I-H-A.
Sounds like a cocktail drink. I'll have a screaming piha, please.
Yeah.
Is that a bird?
It's a plain-looking gray songbird in the Cotinga family that lives mainly in lowland evergreen forests across much of the Amazon and parts of eastern Brazil. Usually forages in the forest mid-story, right? So it's not at the top or the bottom of the trees. It eats fruits and insects, and it's famous not for its appearance, but for its call. Now, I did play a trick on you guys. This is the slowed down version. I'll play it for you again.
Oh, Steve, you're right.
I just love that. Here is the regular version.
Well, that's more
I've
obviously a
heard
bird.
that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
the screaming
see.
peacock. I remember that when I was in the Amazon. They're so loud.
Yeah, they have a piercing scream, but I love it slowed down so much. Listen again.
Wow.
That's like he's at a baseball game or something, you know?
Yeah, he sounds like a siren.
Very cool. Birds are amazing. Their scream, Kara, can be 110 decibels.
That'll
Yeah.
cause damage.
They're loud.
That's dramatic,
One of the
man.
loudest, piercing. They call it a piercing scream.
It's almost as loud as my children screaming when they were younger.
All right, I got a new noise, you guys. This was sent in by a listener named Ram, and here it is.
Nice finish.
When I first heard that, my response was, what the hell is going on?
That's that alien floating outside the spaceship and lost in space.
Oh my God.
Oh my God,
You're
Steve.
right.
Green?
That's why.
She was green, right?
Of course.
Steve,
course.
Steve, don't forget you said that.
Okay.
And had like a conical like hat on her head.
There might
I
be
can picture her.
There might be a
Holy
connection.
crap.
Oh,
There
really?
maybe. I don't know. Let's see. Though very funny. I did not speed it up or slow it down or anything. I just want you guys to send me in a guess if you think you know what this week's noisy is. And if you want to send me a noisy, which I appreciate the number of people who actually do, you can email me at wtn@theskepticsguide.org. Okay, Steve, we have this huge list of shows that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be in Madison, Wisconsin. Those tickets are going to be on May 29th and May 30th. We're doing a secret meetup. We're doing a private show plus, and we are doing an extravaganza all in Madison, Wisconsin. Of course, you can go to the Skeptics Guide for any of the tickets that I'm going to be telling you about. We have Nauticon 2026. That'll be happening in Sydney, Australia. That is happening in July. Actually, that'll be starting on July 23rd.
Do you think we need to go wait online at the airport now, though?
Probably, Bob.
Please don't. No.
We will also be at the New Zealand Skeptics Conference, which will be the following weekend. You can go to conference.skeptics.nz for that. And for anything to do with Nauticon, you can always go to nauticoncon.com to find out the ticket information. Oh, before I forget, so we are actually running out of tickets in some of these events. I had a discussion with Iran, and Iran wanted me to pass along the message that if you typically wait to buy your tickets, you might want to get on it if you want to see any of the secondary shows. All right, so the main conference tickets, we won't run out of those because I got the venue big enough where I can fit more people than I think we're going to get. But the other ones are limited seating, so if you're interested, you should go check those out now. Steve, we're also going to be at SciCon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much looking forward to this. I have a growing list of people that I know that are going to be there, not just speakers, but just friends that I've met through Skepticism. Really looking forward to it. That's going to be from June 11th to 14th in Buffalo, New York. You can go to sciconconference.org to get more information on those tickets.
That's it. But we do want to clarify something we said last week because we were asking people to send in their ideas and fan art or anything for our swag. So Jay and I are in the midst of updating our swag. So and I think what we said was we were poorly worded and it's not what we were talking about. So if the point is, if you have any swag ideas, meaning that there's some SGU swag you would like to see, now's the time to tell us, because this is the time that we are going to be buying swag probably for the next 2 years. Not that we won't ever add anything in the meantime, but this is the time. If there's something that if you have a swag idea and you'll say, I'd love to have an SGU blank, tell us. And in terms of art, we did not mean to give the impression that we never pay for art. We always pay for art. We pay artists for pictures, for digital backgrounds, for music, for anything that we do that's part of all the social media stuff that we put out and all of our swag. We have paid for every piece of art that we're using. However, people do sometimes also send us fan art, which is unsolicited, and we always appreciate that. We use it however we can. And we don't pay for that because it's unsolicited, and we figure people want to send that in. And so we were saying, hey, if people want to send us art, go right ahead. We're not going to pay you automatically for that. But here's the thing. If we really like a piece of art that we want to turn into swag, that's going to need to be iterated and put into a format that we could use. And if we engage with you to do that, we'll pay you for the work that you do. We will pay you for your art. Absolutely. So just to clarify that, we were not saying, we never pay for art or whatever. That's not, I think some people came away with the wrong idea. But that was our fault. We were very unclear in how we said things.
And not only that, but Steve and I didn't even fully have the conversation beforehand. So we kind of winged it. And, historically, anybody that's done business with me, since the SGU started having a positive cash flow, I pay people for everything.
Right.
So, I just want to make that perfectly clear. And it was legitimately something for people to show concern about because, we should not be accepting or asking people to do free work for us. And I happily pay people for the work that they do. That said, so if you want to send us any swag ideas, just, hey, I want you guys to buy a blank because I'd buy it. Or if you want to send us any art concepts, you can just email us at info@theskepticsguide.org. And of course, I will be if I reach out to you or whatever, and we start talking and everything, at some point we can talk about what the cost is. Just to give you clarification, I do not pay percentages. I'll buy artwork outright. But I've done percentages in the past, and it's a huge nightmare. It's a huge nightmare. And if you order something 4 years later, I still have to pay someone. It's too complicated. I would just rather pay to own the artwork outright.
All right, guys, let's go on with science or fiction.
It's time for science or fiction.
Each week, I come up with 3 science news items or facts, 2 genuine and 1 fictitious, and then I challenge my panel of skeptics to tell me which one is the fake. We have a theme this week. The theme is global nutrition. Here we go. Item number 1. About half of all deaths in children under 5 are linked to malnutrition. Item number 2. The most prevalent micronutrient deficiency globally is vitamin A. And item number 3, according to recent data, current fortification programs prevent 7 billion nutritional deficiencies per year. Evan, go first.
Half of all deaths of children under 5 are linked to malnutrition. Linking to malnutrition. So how wide a net is that? That could be a pretty wide net. And if that were the case, then...
So since you bring it up, I didn't know if anyone was going to pick that out, but you did.
That's a good point,
I'll explain it to you. It basically means they wouldn't have died were it not for the malnutrition, probably. Or at least, when we list the cause of death, there's always the proximate cause of death, like his heart stopped. But there's also contributing factors. So it would be listed as a contributing factor leading to the death of that child. Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean they died 100% of malnutrition.
Okay. Right. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It's a sad topic, obviously, but this could be true. The second one about the most prevalent micronutrient deficiency globally is vitamin A. I wish I knew more about which foods contain which vitamins. I'm sadly not perfect in that realm. And, this one leaves itself open to a lot of other possibilities. Now, vitamin A, most prevalent micronutrient deficiency globally. Maybe not. Maybe there are other vitamins that that'd be the only other thing that could be wrong here. I mean, it's A or it's not. So this one's kind of a binary choice. This has a 50-50 chance of being correct or incorrect. The last one is impressive. According to recent data, current fortification programs prevent 7 billion nutritional deficiencies per year. That seems impressive and also correct to me. I may not be able to put my finger exactly why, but I mean, really fortifying our foods with vitamins, and that has got to have results that yield billions. Could it be 7 billion? Maybe that number's too high. I don't think so. I'm going to go with the one that's the 50-50 choice. I'm going to say the vitamin A is going to be the fiction.
Okay, Kara.
Yeah, I think Evan kind of spoke my mind with a lot of these. I would not be surprised if half of the deaths of children under 5 are linked to malnutrition, which is absolutely devastating because that's like 100% preventable. And I would not be surprised I think that the question with fortification programs, I mean, the way you worded it, it prevents 7 billion nutritional deficiencies per year.
Yeah.
You don't mean 7 billion people are not nutritionally deficient per year.
That is correct. There could be more than
exactly.
one deficiency per person.
Right. And like that deficiency is going to be based on some sort of like measurement that's taken in a setting. And so, yeah, there's got to be some way that number is identified and recorded. Yeah. So that one does seem reasonable to me as well. And I mean, honestly, the most prevalent micronutrient deficiency being vitamin A also seems reasonable, but so does vitamin D, so does iron. I'm trying to think of things that a lot of people globally would struggle with, especially because some of these micronutrient deficiencies are simply from not having it in your diet. And sometimes there's another reason, like I am chronically iron deficient and have to get iron infusions. We can't figure out why. I get iron in my diet, so I'm struggling to absorb it. And I think sometimes micronutrient deficiencies happen, yes, because in impoverished regions, there's just simply not enough nutrition available. And sometimes they happen because of other factors, like not getting enough sunlight or maybe having some sort of medical reason that somebody can't get that. So I don't know. I think it's a statistics gamble, like Evan. More things could be true on the vitamin A one, so I'll call that the fiction.
Okay, Bob.
I'm still trying to figure out this 7 billion nutritional deficiencies. I just don't know how much to extrapolate that. I mean, can I have 3 nutritional deficiencies in one day because, that then I eat this cereal and it's like, that's 3.
Well, if you go to the doctor and they do blood work and you have 3 different things that you are deficient on your blood work, that's 3 deficiencies.
It's
in
per
that
year,
reading.
right? It says specifically
it's per year. Okay,
year.
Yeah.
So it's not per day, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, I'm just having a hard time figuring out what would be a reasonable amount of nutritional deficiencies for a person. And then you got to think of other countries, because I'm sure there's plenty of countries that really take fortification programs seriously and put serious money into it. And I'm sure there's plenty of countries that just don't have the funds to really do that as nearly as well, or even at all. For poor countries, I would think fortifying things just is they just don't have the money to do it. And also, what types of fortification programs are there? I mean, first thing I think of is like fortifying cereal and milk. But I'm sure there's probably a million other things
let's take a carbohydrate and coat it in sugar, and we'll spray on some freaking vitamins on there. It's good to eat.
Better than eating it without the vitamin spray.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. It's just funny that it's like, let's take something that is completely unhealthy and spray some vitamins on it and say it's fortified and kids should eat it.
So since that one's kind of really hard to figure out, but numbers 2. I agree. For number 2, there's a lot of other letters in the alphabet besides A, so I'm just going to go with that.
Okay, and J.
Okay, so the first one about half the deaths of children under 5 are linked to malnutrition. I think that one is science. Can't tell you how many times I've read something along the lines of like the food waste in the world would easily feed people who are malnourished. Making a point on both sides. Like there's an incredible amount of food waste and food spoilage, and there's an incredible amount of people who are suffering from it. And what else is going to kill kids? I know there's diseases and everything, but I think malnutrition is the thing that could literally be anywhere. A poor family living in a not so poor neighborhood, your kids could be malnourished. So that's science to me. The last one, it's worded weirdly, like that. I got caught up the same way everyone else did, like 7 billion nutritional deficiencies per year. Like you would figure they'd say, there was 3 billion people that were measured, and they totaled 7 billion nutritional deficiencies. That would have been a much clearer way to say it. Just odd. But I'm going to take it the way that Kara said it and Steve agreed, because Steve agreed. And I think, sure, 7 billion nutritional deficiencies globally, that's it. You know what I mean? I would expect that number to be way higher than that. And then the last one here about vitamin A, I think Kara said that there's a lot of deficiencies, and there are. And at my age, that my doctor has been telling me if I'm deficient or I have too much of something. And it's pretty easy to slip into a deficiency. And yeah, so I think vitamin A is on that list. And Kara, you said iron and vitamin D, like they fortify cereals with vitamin D. I totally agree with that. I think, though, that iron is the number one. I have several reasons to believe that, but I do think it's iron that a lot of people have problems with. Anyway, I think that's the fiction. I think vitamin A is probably on the list, but isn't number one.
All right. So you all agree on the second one. So we'll just take these in order. Item number one, about half of all deaths of children under 5 are linked to malnutrition. You all think this one is science. And this one is science, unfortunately. A lot of those deaths are infection, because malnutrition predisposes you to infections and it compromises your immune system, makes it more likely that you will die from the infection. But it's a lot of other things too: liver failure, heart failure. Lots of other things can happen when you're malnourished. Some of it is dying of starvation, but not all of it, right? Obviously, most of it is dying from other things that you probably would have survived or not caught in the first place if you weren't struggling also with malnutrition. So let's go on to the second one. The most prevalent micronutrient deficiency globally is vitamin A. You all think this one is the fiction, and this one is the fiction.
Okay.
You got it.
Yay!
So I'll tell you, vitamin A is number 3.
Okay.
So what do you think is number 1 and 2?
I think iron and
iron's up there.
Iron and iodine.
That's both correct.
Whoa,
iron is 1.
Iodine.
And iodine is 2.
Iodine. And we fortify salt.
Nice.
Yeah, that's why I thought iodine, because they still sell it in salt, and salt is like used on
right,
everything.
Jay.
So
Yeah.
Good reason.
Yep.
You could have told us.
Yeah, it would have helped us.
Steve,
Well, he
Yeah.
did say he thinks it's iron.
Jesus.
Where is what's fortified with iron?
Oh.
cereal.
Yeah, cereals,
Well, in America,
grains.
worldwide flour.
Yeah, okay, flour.
really?
That would make
Really?
sense.
I've
Yeah.
never seen that in the flour I use. Interesting.
There's also these really interesting, I don't know if you've read about these global programs to deliver, they're basically like iron, little like chunks of iron, or using iron pots and cooking with that in your cooking
So the
water.
iron
So that
comes into
the iron is
food.
infused into whatever you're cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
All right, all this means that, according to recent data, current fortification programs prevent 7 billion nutritional deficiencies per year is science. Now, the technical term they used in the paper was person nutrient intakes. So I didn't, right? That's they're talking about, it's like person years or whatever. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
it's, so we have one person has 3 different nutritional deficiencies or deficient nutrient intakes. That's 3, even though it's one person, right? So, what the study found was that, again, the existing programs at a cost of about $1 billion prevent 7 billion inadequate nutrition intakes. This is that's the global, that's the per person cost. So it's 18 cents per person.
What?
For 18 cents per person, you prevent 7 billion nutritional deficiencies, which saves the economy in both direct healthcare costs and lost productivity, trillions of dollars. Like it's a
ROI
massive ROI.
What else comes close to
Absolutely.
that? I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the number one nutritional deficiency prevented by fortification?
Rice, right? When we fortify rice.
It's mostly iodine, actually.
Oh, it is the iodine.
Oh,
That's
the
our
salt.
most
Yeah,
successful fortification program.
Really?
Yeah. I think just because it's salt and it's so ubiquitous.
It's ubiquitous. Yeah.
But yeah, iron would be next. But yeah, I think it's like 60% iodine or something, some huge amount.
Wow.
But the study also found that there's a lot of headroom there, that if we expand the fortification program, we could prevent as many as an additional 17.2 deficiencies. And that could, again, have massive ROI if we did that. So there's still more to be done. We could basically triple the benefits of the fortification programs if we extend them and they were optimally funded.
And if we combine that with genetic modifications, Steve?
Well, that's part of the program, right? So if you fortify like Mick Golden Rice, which is fortified with vitamin A, then that's a fortification program that's a huge benefit. So the thing about vitamin A deficiency is that it causes like 500,000 instances of blindness every year. So it's not really captured in the deaths. It does cause a lot of deaths too.
Human suffering.
But it's number one the thing that it does is cause blindness. It's a massive cause. It's like the most important cause of blindness worldwide. And it's 100% preventable.
Yeah, and that's not just human suffering. That's actually a massive impact on the economy.
Sure. Yeah.
Because these individuals often can't do the job that they could do previously.
Yeah, so it's like the vaccination program. This is a massive ROI. It's not that expensive. It has a huge payback for the world. And also, of course, just preventing childhood death and human suffering and blindness, etc. So it's worth continuing to invest in this and, in fact, increase that investment and working on technologies to deal with it, like I think the golden rice, for example. So yeah, it shows it's a massively successful program, but it could be 3 times as successful if we optimally invest in it and optimize the standards and improve compliance and do those things. All right, well, good job, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.
Yes, swept me this week.
Steve.
Sure, man.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, Evan, give us a quote.
This week's quote was suggested by Andrew, who is in Jefferson City, Missouri. Thank you, Andrew. De omnibus dubitantum. René Descartes. So that's a Latin phrase meaning everything must be doubted. And it is, of course, most famously associated with the philosophy of René Descartes. But the phrase itself is actually a little more layered, shall we say. It's actually de omnibus esse dubitandum. Doubt as far as possible all things, instead of just simply everything must be doubted. So it's a little more nuanced than that. And that appeared in his 1644 work, Principles of Philosophy.
Yeah, and where he was going with the cogito ergo sum, like I think therefore I am, was he wanted to deconstruct all of philosophy, right? Because there's a lot of philosophy was based upon tradition and authority and whatever. And Aristotle, he said, okay, but if we wanted to go back to first principles, like just break it all down to nothing and then build it back up from first principles, where do you get to, right? What's the first principle? And that was, I think, therefore I am. And then you have to start from that one piece of information, which he said is the only thing you could actually know in and of itself, and then build your philosophy from there. So that was the point of that, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Which is, again, good dovetails with the doubt everything, But still, he's the name Descartes is connected to Cartesian dualism, which is unfortunate.
Oh, right. Forgot about that part.
Yeah, should have doubted that a little bit more. All right, well, thank you all for joining me this week.
Got it, Steve.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Steve.
And until next week, this is your Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Skeptic's Guide to the Universe is produced by SGU Productions, dedicated to promoting science and critical thinking. For more information, visit us at theskepticsguide.org. Send your questions to info@theskepticsguide.org. And if you would like to support the show and all the work that we do, go to patreon.com/skepticsguide and consider becoming a patron and becoming part of the SGU community. Our listeners and supporters are what make SGU possible.